Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And thanks for joining us today for another Frankly Speaking podcast. This is episode 4. My name is Frank Gurnee, and I have with me, joining me today, Frank Raimondi. Frank, say hi.
Hello, hello. Get ready. Good dog, good word on sort of tail. Throw a
With
little
all
foreign
of that,
language in there for the mix.
Yeah, exactly. We have a fantastic topic for you guys today. We're going to be talking about all things cyber insurance. So really excited to talk about that. And we have a guest with us today. Before we get into that, I want to get into a few housekeeping notes. We do this podcast kind of live, and it's an engaging podcast. So those who are on with us live have the ability to ask questions and engage with us. And so with that, if you can hear us and see us okay, you have a little hand raise button on your GoToWebinar panel there. If you can raise your hand for me and let me know everything's working okay, that'd be super fantastic. And just as we're seeing attendees come in, I am seeing hand raises. Great, thank you guys all for that. As well, you do have a questions tab on the GoToWebinar panel there. So anytime you have a question, feel free to put it in there. We'll go through those questions. We may answer them right away. We may answer those towards the end. But if you stick with us, we will get those questions answered for you. So with all of that, it should be good. You know, we like to start this off by talking about some famous Franks out there. And I was thinking of one Frank. You know, this is a pretty obscure one, but Frank Stallone, who was not the most known Stallone out there, it was actually Sylvester's brother, was in many movies. I don't know if you knew that, but he actually was in a good number of movies, and he looks like sort of like Rocky, but not quite. I don't know. Do you have any Franks this week for us?
No, nothing. I still think of Frank Barone as kind of the one that usually comes up first from Everybody Loves Raymond.
Yeah,
Max,
yeah.
we're gonna put you on the spot in a little bit, so just think of a famous Frank. We're going to ask you when we bring Max on. But no, that one, and then historical true ones. I still think back to Franklin Roosevelt, probably the one that mostly stands out. But Frank Lloyd Wright as well as kind of the two. But
yeah. And as we've said before, it's interesting. There's not a ton of famous Franks, but there's a ton of famous Frank characters. So if you look in movies, television, there's just a zillion of them out there, and everybody has an Uncle Frank, right? So I would say at least. So fantastic. Well, this week we're going to be talking about cyber insurance, and there's a lot going on in the cyber insurance world. Our special guest this week is Max Henderson from DataStream. And Max, if you want to pop in here and do a little introduction, we'd love to talk to you and hear about what you guys are doing over there at DataStream, and then get into this topic. So yeah, if you could give us a little background, that'd be great.
Yeah, awesome. And apologies, I'm probably gonna be slightly closer face-wise, so my audio comes through okay. Is this all right, the Franks?
Yeah, sounded good.
Yeah, fast. Great. So yeah, great to have this conversation. Yeah, Max Henderson. I've been Chief Data Officer of DataStream Insurance, which is an insurtech specifically doing brokerage solutions for MSPs, MSSPs, and their customers getting cyber insurance and tech. Yeah, love the Franks intro as well. I'm a Philadelphian, so I run by the Rocky statue pretty frequently. So I didn't actually know that about his brother. And it was funny you mentioned fictional Franks, because again, I'm a bit of a comic nerd, and so my initial thing was to say Frank Castle, the Punisher, and I think I would use Frank Miller, the very famous comic book artist, instead. I don't know if he's come up on previous ones, but he's infamous in the space. But anyway, good to be on.
Fantastic.
Thanks for joining. So Frank, I was kind of thinking, just to as part of the discussion, one of the things that kind of the analogy back to, it kind of goes back to cars, that kind of comes up when we've been talking with MSPs and people, just trying to understand the progression and the extra elements included in insurance requirements. And look back to car seats, and not car seats, but seat belts, right, first, and then car seats, right, and then airbags and other things that were invented and were kind of high end, but then the insurance company realized, gosh, when those are utilized, deaths are less, accidents are less, injuries are less, they have to pay out less, which is a good formula for a good insurance company, right? To be profitable. They want to provide protection when needed, but they want to minimize the need, right? So, Frank, I knew you were at a show last week. I've been at a couple shows recently. Maybe we just sort of talk about what you're hearing from, MSPs, and we have some questions that came in, but kind of what's your day-to-day thing? I kind of make a compliance and insurance kind of in the same vein of connection, but what have you been hearing and thinking about recently?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, right? I mean, if we look at the MSP space, and I go back to around 2003 in the MSP space. So personally, before MSP was really a word, right? And they started talking about that. And, in the past, cyber insurance was, fairly easy to get. It wasn't that regulated. Not a lot happening there, but it was a requirement, things like E&O and all of that stuff. And, it seems to, over time, at least from the perspective of what I'm hearing in the MSP world, is it's gotten very complicated. Everybody has their own way of doing it. Some type of questionnaire or something they have to fill out or something they have to do on the web, right? As far as requirements, people aren't getting paid, right? When there is an issue or something like that. I think there's a lot of fear there. There's been a lot of cost increases in that space. From what I've heard, that what used to be affordable has become very much not affordable over time. And, again, just this major confusion around this kind of area. What do I need to have? What does my client need to have? What is out there? What should we be doing? And so, I'm so excited to have Max here to kind of, hopefully help us uncover some of these and create some easy path that makes sense for MSPs to kind of follow. But yeah, like you, Frank, I'm hearing a lot of just grumbling, right? Just like, I don't know what to do at the end of the day. And that's the hard part with all of this. And,
I think that's what this topic came up.
But have those answers.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's kind of a combination of where do I start and what can I do and what can't I do. So Max, maybe you could sort of answer that question, just simple thing of what, I'm an MSP, I've got customers that I know either have insurance or are going to be needing it. What highest level, what can I know I can't sell, but what can I do and what can't I do?
Yeah, a ton of really interesting stuff in there, and I think it's the physicist in me, but I always like starting kind of with the basic stuff. So you mentioned again MSPs themselves. Really, they were MSPs before the term was even sort of fully materialized. You could almost say MSPs have gone through an evolution as a group or a business. The field itself has kind of matured. Cyber insurance is a lot like that evolution. If I were to give a hand waving first order approximation, it is a relatively new insurance line. Insurance lives and dies off of data, and that has led to a lot of customer challenges and challenges that MSPs or MSSPs will have to deal with because, frankly, right now, like you said, I think a lot of people do find the process complicated, painful, and often expensive because I think people don't know what they're getting for the cost they're paying as well. And the reason that has happened is because insurance was a new product, like you said, Frank. I don't know, we might need nicknames later, or I can just say Frank and I'll always be right. But
yeah, you'll always be right.
I'll always be right. Yeah, insurance, for those that didn't know, cyber insurance, again, it's meant to make you whole. If you're a business, a school, a church, blah, 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 to cover you for losses connected to perils from cyber events like threats from data breaches, ransomware, etc., business interruption. And truly, the product itself was like, first versions of it were like in the late 90s, early 2000s, but it was an extremely immature place. Like, they didn't really know what they needed coverage wise, and they didn't really know what to charge for it yet. So where we're at now, insurers are much, much better at knowing what customers need. So there has been a convergence on the types of perils that is covered. So when you buy a $1 million insurance product, it's much more standardized than it was a decade ago. And the pricing is the part that gets in people, because that has changed, especially like from 2020 to now. There's been a lot of volatility. People might think that is related directly to their own cybersecurity, but again, this is actually more from the entire insurance space itself. When ransomware emerged, particularly during COVID, as a lot of things were moving virtual, insurers got a lot of losses coming in. That meant all of a sudden the easy to fill out applications went away, because underwriters are going, I need more information, because we were taking a bunch of losses.
It wasn't I tested this, so check, and submit it, and you're good. That validation is coming into play.
100%. But the problem is those underwriters, they were trying to sort of be extra safe, right? I want maybe too much information, maybe information that doesn't give me a lot about your security, because they were taking losses. So I think this space is in its teenage years now. I think like cyber insurance is not a toddler anymore, but it's also not a full grown adult, where I think people realize they definitively have a very good actuarial knowledge of individual company risk. I think it's gotten better, and I think it's gotten better because it's leaned on cybersecurity experts to help refine the types of questions that the insurance carriers are asking about. But high level, this is a little bit of like where I think the MSP evolution space is similar to cyber insurance in general. It is, it's evolved now, but it has gone through this progression of changes. And I think the space where we're at now is, I guess, an optimistic take at the end of this. Prices are finally starting to come down, because some of those loss drivers, I think, are better understood, and also seeing fewer losses against them. So insurers are feeling safer, because they feel like they understand the risk better, lowering prices, or at the very least not seeing these big increases that we saw previously. So, and I'm sure we're going to talk about security standards and everything else, but I guess bird's eye view, that's like the frame of reference I would have just thinking about this space in general. It can seem super complicated, chaotic, and expensive, but it's mainly because real companies have, they wanted to make it too easy, and then I think they probably got a little too conservative, maybe in some sense, in terms of information and price. And now I think there's a settling out that's happening.
Yeah, no, we've heard that. I've heard that a lot, just from you and other insurance folks, but also just the partners that are processing this. So one of the things I was kind of thinking about as well, maybe you can just clarify again, just around the regulations of selling insurance, right? And what an MSP can say that they're offering or not, or how do they position, hey, Mr. Customer, you need cyber insurance, here's DataStream, here's something. Yep. Maybe just clarify that, just set that record straight.
Yeah, 100%. So to sell cyber insurance, you do need to be a licensed broker. And that means if you're an MSP, you really can't get paid directly from selling that product to a customer, unless you decide you want to spend, a little bit of free time becoming a licensed insurance broker, which, hey, more power to you if you do. This obviously does make insurance, or has made insurance, a little bit of the odd child for some of the conversations, because you might have a client that you're pretty used to how business works, where, there's a commission that is associated with upgrading a technology or getting a customer to come on board, getting a seat. Insurance doesn't work like that again unless you get licensed. So where we try to, what DataStream in particular tries to do, and hopefully what other good brokers try to do with their partners, is they try to use insurance more as a tool, which is really dictating security spending in general. And it absolutely is. Like, I think, Frank, you talked a little bit about insurance and compliance. They sit a little bit in the same room. I think that's absolutely true. I frequently say this on webinars just like this, that I think cyber insurance questionnaires themselves, they're almost becoming a new bespoke security framework. It's just not coming straight out of the security community. It's more coming out of the insurance community. And they have been trying to figure out better and better questions around, if you answer yes or no to this, how does this influence the expected loss you will have in the next given year, financially speaking? So, so while you cannot make like 5% of an insurance commission if you're not a licensed broker from a customer buying a policy, what we try to do is we run automated gap analysis on every customer that comes through to highlight key missing security controls that we know based off the tens of thousands of quotes we have historically and machine learning models we build on top of that. We try to help give MSPs a really easy script to say, you're missing X, Y, and Z. You're going to get fewer quotes because of that. And even the quotes you get, they're going to be higher priced. You could basically upgrade this service. That's where the MSP can make more revenue and sort of get a 2-for-1 here, because you're going to get a reduced premium. So that, I think, is where insurance should continue to live. And feel free to cut me off at any time, but coming back to like Philly adjacent things, this is very much in the Franklin fire insurance thing. You know, if you do better practices, you would get cheaper fire insurance policies, so everyone's a little safer and your individual house is also low risk.
Right.
That's where cyber should go.
The analogies really do play. I mean, it's insurance business, whether it's for fire or for cyber. I mean, it's the same principles throughout. Maybe you could describe a couple of, this is what kind of the questions came in ahead of time is, you know, what are they really looking for in those controls? You talked about some general things, but what are the 3 or 4, maybe it's 10, I don't know, what is I mean, I'm going to say vulnerability management because we're a little selfish on that, but what are the key things that they're really looking for that says, if you're going to get the best rate possible, you must have X, Y, Z, et cetera?
Yeah, it's a great question. So to give just a couple quick explicit ones, like MFA for email, solid backups, typically again, cloud, multiple versions of backups as well. Tested disaster recovery plans. These are like a couple that I would highlight. And again, some of these would have been nice to haves before, but where I think the insurance space has gotten smarter is, again, some of the most typical losses. If you, I guess another one is like out of band authentication, where let's say, again, you get a suspicious email to wire a bunch of money, having processes in place where you verify with more than one, from more than one source, like you pick up a phone and you call to verify whoever's saying the transaction's coming from is legit. Those are maybe like 4 ones which we see those features influence what our models say are predictive of price. Like if you don't have like good offline backups, your premium is predicted to be higher. If you cannot recover and haven't tested, being able to be back online in 10 days or less, absolutely that's going to influence your price. And in some sense, this is because when insurers think about risk, they think about, does this influence the likelihood it's going to happen? And does it influence the severity? Some of these things influence more like the likelihood. Others are, you know, some of the most expensive losses can be from like business interruption and downtime. So you need to be able to say like, yeah, we test those things and we have good backups. Those are some key examples. And MFA is just such a cheap frontline, great first events. That basically has become almost a hard requirement after 2021.
Yeah. Would you say some of those technology requirements are they sort of validated during the term of the policy? I mean, you know, every 3 months, do you have to do a attestation that you're doing these things, or is that a standard policy element these days, or they just check when on renewal unless there's something that's happened?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would say that I think you talked a little bit earlier too about like car insurance as an example, like, and where I think some very sophisticated car insurance products is that if your smartphone is in the car, you might be almost getting real-time risk information based on your driving that could ultimately influence your pricing. I would be very surprised if in like 25 years or hopefully less, in cyber insurance doesn't look quite similar to that, where you have, you know, it's where we're trying to go right now, where rather than get people to just fill out questionnaires online, eventually you'd like to just pull more data right from the source, from like network data, other security and technology data, and be able to do that almost in a real-time fashion for especially things like dangerous new vulnerabilities that pop up. We're not there right yet. So what this still looks like right now is filling out questions. And often if you are interested in a particular quote, that insurer might read over your application and ask for supplemental information as well during the process. But typically, people would trust you because what you are doing when you say, this is my security, is you are attesting to it. And only once you have a claim is that deeper level of scrutiny going to come into play, where they're going to want to see your homework a little bit. Like, hey, you told us 42. How'd you actually get there? Show your work. That's
Yeah.
where, again, you know, the deeper due diligence typically happens, although what we're trying to do is get up front as much as we can and give a little bit more of that data at the beginning so they can see, hey, look, here's an extra level of their detail about how many users are using MFA, you know, the types of technologies they have, blah, blah, blah. And then they're more like verifying, oh, that's still true today. So you were true then, you're true now, that kind of a thing.
Well, I'm kind of thinking, again, just to make the connection back to the compliance world, right? There are GRC tools and compliance reporting tools that, like, Nova, for example, puts data into, and it shows that we're doing it and shows what the scores are. I mean, I wonder if those tools might get modified or updated by the insurance industry to say, you know, once a quarter, I need a report that shows what you're doing, right? And so great, you continue your policy.
Yeah, I think that's where I was going to, Max, is like, how soon do you think that the insurance companies are going to have some type of standardization around the requirements for MSPs or for their clients, where it's kind of, you know, standard across the board, have these things? And do you think that it's the insurance companies that will drive the requirements or offerings, or will it be the MSPs saying these are the services and products we provide to our clients, you know, and you guys will bend to that, or is it kind of a combination of both? What do you think from an opinion standpoint around all of that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I do think insurance plays a very important role here, and so I do believe the one type of data that insurers get, and again, I'm a PhD physicist. You don't typically dream of getting insurance thinking it's sexy. I've kind of come around on it a little bit, and I think mainly the reason I've come around on it a little bit is that they get really good data that frankly other people don't have. And I think that what the insurance community misses is subject matter expertise in terms of, like, again, they have had to get smarter on what good security looks like and the processes and controls around that. But what the data they have that sort of nobody else does in a meaningful way is true information about policies and claim histories, because that really, to me, is a beautiful way of trying to, without getting too esoteric, I guess, cyber risk in general is a concept. It's very hard to say risk is like a quantitative metric. People have their 0 to 100s or A to F kind of scales. I think expected losses against a very specific policy is as close as you can get to a very objective view of risk. And that's the way the insurance world looks at it. So where I think there's power in that is that when an insurance company says, I think this type of, I think, if you're in manufacturing and you don't have EDR, we're not going to give you a policy. I think like where statements like that hold a little extra oomph and might dictate a bit more than coming the other way is that they're sitting on the actual numbers for who is getting lit up in terms of losses. And I think that also lets them influence with cheaper products kind of, again, what makes sense to buy. So I think it's always going to work uphill going the other way. Like even if the security community was absolutely convinced of a particular protocol, if that never influenced pricing for insurance and you still had customers that wanted to transfer some of that financial risk, I don't know if it's a guarantee that everyone would adopt it in the same way. So yeah, I think so that would probably be my opinion. So take it with a grain of salt, I suppose.
Yeah, I think the other interesting thing around this would be that that data that you're talking about that could be so valuable, it actually could be really valuable to the MSP too, because a lot of their pricing models are around what we expect to happen, right? So if I'm an all-you-can-eat type solution, all-in pricing per user or per device or whatever it is, I'm not expecting these bad things to happen. And if you have the data that says these bad things do happen on this often, right? their pricing could basically also be skewed by those numbers. Like, I'm going to expect this many breaches or things where it's going to take me 100 hours of work to get someone back up and running or something like that. So I think, it'd be nice to see some of that data or have that be shared to the MSP world, even through blog posts or however Max through DataStream can do that, just for helping managed service providers price things right at the end of the day. Not even insurance in general, but their offerings and how this could kind of come into play. So I was just thinking of that when you were talking about that as well. So
Yeah, it's a really good point, and yeah, I think so. Yeah, directionally, I think where we really want to go to, I think it's an excellent point, and I think like it's interesting too because so our parent company, they're in the reinsurance game, which if you're not interested in insurance, reinsurance might make you roll your eyes even harder. But yeah. But hopefully, if you're on this call, you care slightly about it. Reinsurance is almost like an even funkier problem where they're really worried about correlated aggregated risk. And I think where that's interesting is that MSPs in a funky way are almost like little carriers in the sense that they are single points of failure. Like we've had obvious examples in the past where an MSP with tons of customers, if they get hit, that's a big contagion risk. And so I think it's both useful for MSPs to really have tighter or closer relationships with the insurance way of thinking because it will one help you understand probably how to price things and again how that insurance monetary risk relates maybe back to how you're charging things, but it also gives them a view of like, let's say something goes wrong, not even me with the MSP, but like somebody somewhere in my customer base, because it's not the if, it's the when question, right, gets hit, how likely are there like contagion effects in my own population of customers, right? How like, you know, completely uniform is the stack that we're using and things like that. Like, so probably not as big a deal to smaller MSPs, but like for the larger people that again start to have in the hundreds or larger of customers, that it kind of is an interesting separate problem. So yeah, I think hopefully much better insights for that kind of class in the future. We'd love to be part of that conversation.
Yeah. Just from maybe a little bit more tactical element. So I'm an MSP. I want to sort of bring attention to cyber insurance and offer it somehow to my customers. What's your process? What do they do with you, and what do they do for the customer? What do the customer need to do? Kind of just the process of getting that application in.
Yeah, it's a great question. So what we've built is sort of like a multi-tenant cyber insurance system that is free for any MSP or MSSP to use. Basically, they log in through DataStreamInsurance.com, set themselves up as a partner, and they can click a button at any point to refer one of their customers and start to fill out basically this single application that we can then send to 40 different insurance carriers. And some of them give back almost real-time quotes because they have their own API system set up. What MSPs will typically do is like help answer some of the security questions that the customer might not know as well. And then the customer separately would log in and they can add as many people as they want. They fill out their application, they test to the correctness. After they submit it, they start getting back quotes, mostly, within minutes. They could have a couple dozen. And then how we try to work as the DataStream side is help advise them on policy selections, answer any questions that they have, which are confusing about any wordings of the questions throughout the process. And I guess also make sure they're at a good place before they even apply. I think the two main tools we built, we have an incident response plan building tool so that, again, I've said this in a bunch of webinars, but if you're actually going through an incident, it's like that classical psychological effect where you're panicking a little bit, so your IQ like drops. You want like a dead simple script for what you should be doing, who you should be calling. Yeah. So we have a tool for generating that. And we also have what we call the Cyber Insurance Risk Assessment, or a CIRA, which basically you enter your industry, your size, your website, and we can at least do what every insurance company is doing and do some external scanning, run it against some machine learning models and say, hey, for a bank with 100 employees, you look like you're about the risk we expect or elevated because we found some scary stuff on your external network, or you look really great. So we try to basically give them some material to be prepped beforehand make that application process as smooth as possible.
Max says there's a lot of insurance companies out there, obviously, and not speaking directly to DataStream, but one of the big concerns, as we talked about earlier, is not getting paid out, right, on a claim. Is there any data or statistics around how often people aren't getting paid? Because I know that's the scary thing and the thing we hear about the most, right? Is claims not getting paid out, things not getting done, and not speaking to DataStream per se that's happening there, but industry-wide, it seems to be something that has a lot of people worried, right? So do you have any data around that or information around that?
I do. It's a great question. This has got to be like one of the biggest boogeymen that I think sometimes dogs cyber insurance. Like I'll start with a well-known one, life insurance. Everybody's familiar with that product probably. Life insurance products have regulators, and if a life insurance product starts to deny more than about a percentage of claimants, that can like really raise alarm bells. And like if you don't pass reviews from those regulators, your products get pulled off the shelf. And like, so I think there was this narrative that like cyber insurance is just this like BS kind of product at some point in time, doesn't pay out, blah, blah, blah. There are regulators doing the exact same kind of thing for cyber insurance. Like if these products were truly crap and didn't pay out, they wouldn't exist in some sense. Like they get pulled off the shelves. But I think what does happen, obviously, is that there is a higher chance of a couple main reasons these things get messed up. And like, again, where I think this complexity problem comes in, the most common reason claims do get denied when they do get denied is they just grossly sort of were off about their cybersecurity posture. And like, so one of the
reasons, all the boxes that really weren't nothing behind it.
Yeah, and this again makes sense because this is just a more complicated. If you've ever gone through again life insurance, right? Some of those questions you're kind of like in your head, like, well, how exactly do I answer that? It feels like blah blah. Like, well, this is a much more technical product. If you're not like in security, yes, like it's easy to make those mistakes, which is why we love working with MSPs and MSSPs so much because
that speaks to MSPs helping these guys get all that stuff figured out, right?
Exactly. Apps offer those services, right? I mean, it's an additional service or product that they can sell.
100%. Like really just that kind of like, again, it's almost like a compliance review in a sense, right? Like you're going through, like the insurance process itself is almost something a company should do, even if they don't buy a policy, because it's like forcing you to get a little more, it's forcing you to get real about where your company's at against metrics, which the insurance community thinks could be impacting how likely you really are to have an expensive claim. So yeah, that's the most common reasons for flat out claim denials. The thing that does happen is that I think sometimes people will say like, oh, they didn't pay out. Well, they did pay out, but like there are arguments about the exact costing of stuff. And this is still like where the devil's in the details. Like, you have to go through this like anything else. Like, hey, I have a home insurance policy and I got a leak through my roof. There's going to be somebody that comes and reviews it and estimates costs. And like once in a while, they probably like over or under do that. And so there is like back and forth. But like, in terms of just like this product being some totally different thing, it's not. There are regulators that would pull it off the shelf if it's not. And the thing that people do mess up is just being flat out wrong. So working with an IT service provider like your, MSP, MSSP, that you have a huge role in that kind of, I guess, regard, and a value proposition almost for people interested.
Yeah. One of the things our colleague Matthew Koenig wrote up, it's actually a recent blog that we have posted on the Nodeware site, is an idea for MSPs to work with their customers by asking them to review their policy, right? Mm-hmm. So you have a policy in place, let me take a look at it, just sort of free evaluation. Do you know that you're supposed to have these things, but from what I understand, you don't. So here's a gap that, kind of to your point, they're saying they were doing these things, but they really weren't. The MSP can be a consultative and say, you know what, if you really want this renewed, or if God forbid you were to get hit, your likelihood of payout is less because you're not doing the things that you had outlined and attested to. So, is that kind of a process you guys help with too? If an MSP's got working with their client and they've got their policy in hand and you can help them review it and do that analysis?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, we have been doing like essentially like policy reviews for a very long time, and there are like again, there's certain customers where uh they're very green, so it might be like the first one they've got and it's not quite the right fit. There are others that are really seasoned and they know exactly what they're looking for, so they're more looking to like get better pricing, and that's where we are useful kind of in both regards. We try to make it a mix of like again what we know from like being experienced brokers in this space, what they should be going after depending on the type of company they are, but also trying to provide data when we can, like for instance like counts about, hey, companies like you at this size in this industry, here's like the typical limit, and here's also some of the key coverage areas underneath that you don't want to be sublimited past a certain amount. So that's again some of the logic that goes into quotes that we suggest at the end of the process. As we surface quotes to the customer, we try to highlight basically the best bang for their buck that also meets some logic run on top of key coverage areas. Like you don't want to be gutting, business interruption. You also don't want to be like going too low for like social engineering, because those are still driving the largest number of claims. It's still people just like, business email compromises and things like that. So if you go too low, you really do shift your risk in ways that we run simulations to show like, hey, it doesn't maybe seem like a big deal going from like 100K to 250K of coverage on like, social engineering, but like, based on the data we have, like a quarter of the time, you're going to be way over 100,000 of loss if you do get hit with one of these things. So, it's not the majority of times, but there's a substantial difference in the coverage you would actually get beneficially from that kind of sublimit difference. So what we can, we offer data, modeling, and expertise.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense from the MSP side. Thinking back to when I was selling managed services, one of the things we utilized was we'd go in and ask the client if they could show us their phone bills and their internet stuff, and we would work with a telecom broker to essentially find them a better deal. And at the end of the day, we could say, look, we could save you X thousands of dollars, which essentially pays for our managed service offering or for your new cybersecurity upgrades, right? And I think it makes a lot of sense from that perspective that an MSP could partner with a cybersecurity insurance company or broker to really use that same methodology to go in and provide those additional upgrades or updates or their full managed service offering just by bringing those policies into check and maybe saving them some money potentially.
There's one broker company that's channel focused that does kind of if you're doing this set of services, right, then you're guaranteed a lower rate, right? And you can attest to it and you can prove it along the way. Again, it's kind of the same things we've been talking about, but it's a nice, pretty prescriptive way, right? I mean, I think some of the questions we had coming in beforehand were about, well, what do I have to offer? What should I? You described that a little bit, kind of the key things there. But I would just remind attendees on live, if you have any other questions, I think we're doing a pretty good job of the questions that came in. I think we've answered most of those, but maybe Frank, you and I can just take another eyeball at those and make sure that we're hitting people's interest.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those topics that has a lot of questions and a lot of things that we'd love to learn about. So if you're listening right now and you're live, feel free to drop some questions in there. We can definitely ask Max, and as he said, he'll let us know as much and as best as he possibly can to give us as much information as possible. So we've got him now to do that. Yeah, I mean it's all coming together, but man, is it slow? It feels like, Max. Standardization, I think, would be fantastic around. This is exactly what you needed, how to do it. Everybody having their own kind of questionnaire and ways and things is not how we're used to things being done in the MSP world, at least. You want the prescriptive, very,
yes.
Here's the offering I have, and here's why we offer that. I'd love to see this come, and I'm sure it will over time, right? It's just going to take time. So, Frank, you had something?
Oh, sorry, I didn't know if other Frank had anything there.
No, go ahead, Max. I'll have a question when you're done.
Yeah. I think you are correct, and I think that I think partially the reason it's slow is that this is intrinsically super interdisciplinary, basically. Like cyber insurance has a whole bunch of different, well, not only that, right? Specifically, cyber insurance as a process or tool or value proposition for MSPs, that being clean and simple and easy is slow because it involves, a bunch of different players, and there's a bunch of different incentives and complications. Like the insurance companies, they want to be profitable and release products that stably generate new cash flow. They don't necessarily know, or didn't in the past, what technology security stuff was important. MSPs care about security, but it's also not the only thing they're caring about. So they're really trying to make this play nice with all the other just like normal technology offerings and problems that, that sometimes can be like a little bit more intense, I think, is the sense. Like on a typical day, if like, an MSP is firefighting, insurance applications are not going to be the very highest thing on their list as well. So there's like all these different cooks in the kitchen. But I think where there are baby steps here is that, like, stuff like what I think we've built, like having a single standard application that we can at least shop to a bunch of carriers. So there's like a little bit less of that you could also like pre-populate that application from some of our cybersecurity tool integration partners, of which we've talked about some interesting concepts there as well. But I think, the more you can make this one click easy for partners to sell and weaponize, I think that is where it's going. And like a version of this in the future that I don't think would be crazy is like, we continue to not only map cybersecurity vendor data to our questions that we need to answer so that, there's harder data backing up that evidence. But I think being able to upload your own personal stack and kind of map that to how to sell insurance is where this will go. It's just, yeah, you're right. Some of it feels, I think, a bit slow because, the partner space is also a diverse place. The economic models are very different as well for between partners. So I think trying to make it just all play together is, something the space hopefully will address. But yeah,
Well,
piece by piece.
It's very related to one of the questions again that came in ahead of time that I'll kind of paraphrase. But a lot of MSPs, will hear from their customers, "Oh, I'm too small. Nobody cares about my business. I'm not, I don't need those extra tools you're suggesting because, yeah, I'm fine. I've got antivirus. I'm good." Right. So it's kind of very closely related question with regards to insurance. It's the same. Hey, I've got my property insurance for my office, but I don't, I'm questioning about whether I really need that or not, or why. Last thing I need is cyber insurance. Come on, I'm too small. Right? It's the same frame of mind. So maybe how you've consulted with MSPs to what's the positioning they can use. How do you overcome some of that?
Yeah, I think this is one of the opinions I have, which I feel less worried about having a wrong one, and one that I'll, if you remember, like one hot topic thing to bring up with customers, a version of this that probably, again, is not surprising. So, I've worked in the startup space the last 10 years doing a lot of machine learning work, but like AI has exploded the last couple years in terms of like importance and kind of just general awareness from ChatGPT like technologies and such. There's been lots of different speculations about how better AI is going to impact security, but I think one of the things, especially if you are serving a bunch of, hey, I'm typically what we would hear is like, obscurity is security. If I'm small enough, no one cares about me. I don't have to worry about it. What we have seen is that, like, basically the harder, bigger enterprises now are super sophisticated, tough targets. Certain nation states can break into them if they want to spend some time and effort, but they're tougher to break into. It's rare. It happens. It's always going to happen, but it's harder. And AI has made it really simple to do some basic attacks on smaller targets. So I think the moral here is that there's a lot of benefits to the new wave of AI type technology, but it's going to bring the cost to more sophisticated attacks at smaller companies to a place where I think that's much more, it would not surprise me if that's where a bunch more companies are getting targeted and hit successfully because they're kind of underprepared. This would have been too much work for hacker groups to do before, but they can do a zillion of these by automation now. And so I think that would be a pushback, I think, against the whole I'm too small to care about this. Like, you're definitely not. And I think anecdotally, you hear more and more people, if you don't have people in your own family, like even individuals getting targeted much more significantly than like 10 years ago. Like, the target size is moving smaller because the really sophisticated big ones are pretty hard, and the technology for doing much larger small scale targeting is really cheap now. So I think that would be one thing I would say if I'm an MSP trying to convince someone that they're not too small. Actually, the small people are where they're making their money now for a lot of these groups.
Yeah.
So,
Max, do you think an eventuality is that the cybersecurity insurance companies provide some type of application like a mini pen test or something that you put on the network, let it run, it's going to check for vulnerabilities, it's going to try to get into those emails, do some phishing attack, do some of that. Do you think that's something that either is going to be a requirement from insurance for the MSP to load on a system, or something that they give to the MSP to say, look, run this instead of the questionnaire that they have currently? You think that's a potential something that might come down the road?
yeah, it's a really good question. And this sort of, I think, comes back to a point you were saying earlier, like, again, in the CAR methodology. I think there's basically a lot of different people, a lot of different types of companies that are sort of trying to become more than one thing, if that makes sense. So I said before, like, most insurance carriers right now, they're not installing agents on your system necessarily, but there are some insurance companies which have basically built their own security product, and that is only available. They're sort of like a pair. So then there is a bit more real-time monitoring. So what am I saying? That some insurance companies are almost becoming like a security company. Some, just like some MSPs are almost becoming their own security companies as well. So there is this, like, I think, space where it's not as clear cut. Like, there's going to be bleed over, and I don't know who's going to like win the day in all of these fights exactly, but some of them definitely will look more like that, where it's like, hey, to get an insurance product, you need an agent, this specific agent running on your network, either at some cadence or all the time to qualify. And versions like that are already happening now. Like, some insurance products have a technology associated with it, and if they detect something and you don't fix it within a reasonable time, they can, like, basically, it's like you're breaking your policy terms essentially. So versions like that are already happening. And where again DataStream likes to sit is like, we just see ourselves a little bit like Switzerland in some of this stuff. Like, we really are trying to just be the best insurtech company at the broker place. So there are going to be also people coming from both the security and the insurance side that are also trying to almost get into the managed service sort of world. So I think, like, where we want to sit and where we see as a buffer a little bit is that let the MSPs and the MSSPs do what they're really great at. Let us help on the cyber insurance part. But yeah, I think there's going to continue to be this blurred line sort of thing. Some cybersecurity companies are releasing their own insurance products as well. So it's like, this is, I think, an interesting time for those types of, like, across the edges bleed out. I think you're going to see, like, lots of new products and market attempts, I think, made.
Yeah, Matt, do you think there's again, because of this confusion and evolvement and evolving state, is there DataStreamInsurance.com, one resource, is there any other kind of, places to go just to kind of keep up on trends, or, is there an insurance news, I don't know what might be out there, but any place that you might recommend an MSP to kind of just keep an eye on things at?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's obviously, it's one of the things we try to do, and keep people educated as best we can with our own materials. There are some great conferences out there, such as like Net Diligence, InsurTech. There's like insurance specific conferences for also keeping up with trends. I think, like, for MSPs that are really busy and don't have the time to like do such things, It's actually an interesting point. It might be, there probably are even better like aggregator sites for conversations like this, basically. But one of the things we try to do is like we have a repository now of I don't know how many of these webinars, kind of diving into various related questions. But yeah, I think so. There are other great cyber insurance companies out there that post pretty regularly their own materials. So I think like, picking who you like, maybe one or a few, and keeping on top of the white papers and occasional webinars they might have is a good way of staying on top of it. And yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, we did have one question come in through the questions tab here. So do you go through service packages that the MSPs offer to give the MSPs an idea of what kind of coverage levels those packages will typically cover? So when you're sitting down with the MSP and the client, is that something that you guys do or offer, Max?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, it's a great question. What we try, so sort of in a two-part thing, I guess I would say. So one thing we try to do is like with our brokerage team, anytime an MSP would have basically want to know this, like, hey, we want to walk through our stack and figure out sort of where we normally would come out in terms of a risk here. We could basically jump right into that and like walk them through the platform, but also highlight like, again, here are some of the key features questions we know drives prices and availability. Here's how we could map what you have to that. On the technology side, we can also allow the MSP to more or less, if they do have a fairly standard package, basically they can create like a template referral. And then anytime they have an actual new customer, they can just, from that template, pre-populate basically everything they already had. So it's kind of like, hey, yeah, we'll run through this to talk about the security and how that will impact probably pricing for this customer. But then also, you don't have to redo this every single time you'd be sending someone over. Here's the easy button for just pre-populating then the sort of typical stack, and you can adjust on top of that then individual changes.
No, that makes a ton of sense, man. This has been fantastic and completely eye-opening as far as like just giving us a ton of really great information around cybersecurity insurance and how we can kind of get involved as MSPs and that sort of thing. Of course, Frank and I, so the two Franks here, we both look to this area a lot because we are in vulnerability management, and that tends to be something that most insurance requires, and most security frameworks require vulnerability management. So obviously, if you guys who are listening now want to learn more about DataStream and Max, you can go to datastreaminsurance.com. We'll also have that information up on our site, so nodeware.com/frankly speaking, and that's where we'll have the recordings of these podcasts that we do, as well as information on the guests that we have on. So Max, thanks so much for joining us today. This has been great. We really appreciate it. And guys, just go to nowhere.com/frankly speaking if you want to learn more about us or Max or any of the above. So thanks, Frank, and Max. Thanks, guys. Have a great one. Take care.
Appreciate the time, bud.
You too. Great chatting. Cheers.
All right,
Thanks,
we'll
guys.
see you again.